Let's turn the video on. Oh, I see a very important individual. That used to be a TV show.
Yep.
Yeah. So es Fuller House.
You got the audio on? We're on live, right? All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Hialeah Planning and Board meeting for Wednesday, September the 7th, 2022. Tonight, we're going to have two meetings. We're going to have a land use, a couple of items on land use, and the regular planning and zoning meeting. So what we'll do is we'll open up the floor for planning, for land use, hear the cases. Once those cases are done, we'll close that meeting and we'll open up the planning and zoning. So, all right, so let's do the invocation and the pledge of allegiance. One place, right? Stand. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity granted us here tonight. We ask that you please watch over us, give us the guidance to go through these items in front of us, and please help us make the right decisions for all those involved. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May be seated.
Meeting guidelines. The following guidelines apply to today's Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Any person, whether participating via the web platform, telephonic conferencing, or physical presence at City Hall, interested in making comments or posing questions on any item on the agenda may do so during the meeting. Members of the public may hear the meeting live through telephonic conferencing using any telephone or cellular phone service. A smart device or computer are not necessary to participate in the meeting if you join by phone. All persons participating via the web platform will be muted during the meeting until called upon to be heard. Participation through Zoom requires a computer or smart mobile device with microphone and web camera. A participant may elect to participate in the meeting using audio only or appear through both audio and video. The video function of all participants appearing through video will be turned off until called upon to be heard. All lobbyists must register with the Planning and Zoning Board prior to item being heard. A maximum of 4 speakers in favor and 4 speakers in opposition will be allowed to address the Planning and Zoning Board on any item. Each speaker's comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Roll call. Mr. D. Perez?
Here?
Mr. Gamon?
Here.
Mr. Iglesias?
Here.
Mr. Jimenez?
Here.
Mr. Ulloa? Mr. Casanova?
Here.
Mrs. Enriquez? Here. We have a quorum. Administration of oath to all applicants and anyone who will be speaking before the board on any item.
Anyone and everyone that is going to speak in front of the board, please stand and raise your hand. That also includes those that are in the electronic audience. Raise your hand, please, so we can swear you in.
You affirm to tell the truth before this board.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom other than Deborah? No? Okay, let the record show that the answer was on the affirmative. Thank you all.
Summary minutes or a copy of the audio file of the proceedings before the Planning and Zoning Board shall be prepared and submitted to the City Council before its hearing. The Planning and Zoning Board recommendations for the following public hearing requests will be heard by the City Council at its scheduled meeting of Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. LU1, small scale map amendment from residential office to commercial. Property located at 3375 West 4th Avenue, Hialeah zoned RO, residential office. Applicant Cesar Mestre, Esquire.
Good evening, Cesar Mestre, offices at 8105 Northwest 155th Street, Miami Lakes, Florida.
Thank you, sir.
The property in this application is located at the southeastern intersection of Red Road and West 34th Street. The property has residential office, RO, land use, and is improved with a one-story office building with an adjacent parking lot. All the properties fronting Red Road, north of West 30th Street up to West 35th Street have residential office land use. However, the property immediately north of the subject property has been granted a variance in 2011 to allow 9 occupational licenses on a RO property, thus allowing an intensification of the residential office use more consistent with a commercial land use than with the residential office land use. The applicant is before the city requesting a land use change from residential office to commercial with the purpose of redeveloping the site with a new 2-story building with a lobby and parking on the first floor and medical offices on the second floor. On a separate application, the applicant is requesting a similar change for the adjacent property, proposed to be developed as a parking lot to serve the subject property and to create a buffer between the existing single-family home and the proposed building. Since the residential office land use and zoning classification proved to be outdated because they do not meet the current demands of professional offices, many offices within this classification remain the same as in the 70s and 80s, since there is no incentive for renewal because of the limitation on the number of occupational licenses allowed. Having analyzed the issue and trying to accommodate to the current demands of professional use, staff believes that a land use change to commercial paired with a low-intensity commercial classification such as B1 would incentivize the replacement of old professional offices, such as the subject property, as it is already occurring along the 49th Street corridor west of Red Road. The city traffic concurrency system indicates that the traffic level of services will be met. The site is served by PS 04-059, that is in TM, which is temporary moratorium status, which allocation is not allowed. The station has to be reviewed to verify if additional lining is needed for final certification. The applicant shall contact the Public Works Department to agree on the next steps and submit a briefing with its rezoning application. Recommendation, approval.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr.
I have a PowerPoint presentation which has been submitted. Okay, the client here is La Colonia Medical Center. I'm sure you've seen them around town. This is the property on Red Road. It is the corner, the one we're dealing with right now is the corner lot. And the next item, LU2, is the lot right next door, which is the next item coming up. But this presentation will be good for both items. Next slide. This is what's, no, the one before that. There you go. No,
This one?
that one, yeah. This is what's currently there. There is a medical office with a parking lot on the corner. The proposal that we
Issue.
have, the proposal that we have is to keep medical offices and make the parking lot in the lot right next door. The next slide. This is a picture from our current parking lot directly north. This is the building that's located right across the street from us. So basically, what you have across the street is what we're trying to mirror now on our property. It's going to be a 2-story medical building with the parking lot next door, which, as staff said in their report, is going to serve as a buffer between this low-intensity commercial and the residential area. So it's going to be exactly what's already there in the neighborhood. Next slide. This is what the ultimate project will look like. Obviously, we'll come before you if you grant us the recommendation of approval for the land use. We'll come back with more detailed plans on the rezoning to the low-density commercial. All of these properties along this corridor, on this block and the next block, are presently zoned RO. This is a zoning that was done years ago, and it was done for professionals basically to have their home and their office at the same location. But as we all know, especially the medical profession, accounting professions have changed a lot over the years. So just as the property across the street had to come in and ask for a variance to allow more than the 2 licenses that are allowed now, in the past, the doctor would have his license and that would be it. Now it's the doctor, it's his physician's assistant, it's the nurse. So there's a number of licenses required for the same type of business. So based on that, we're asking you to allow us to change the land use to the low-intensity commercial so that we can be exactly like the building across the street with the same type of business. We ask you for a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mestre. Any comments or questions from the board?
Not at all.
I have one small question. The existing building is a one-story building. Are you planning on building up on it or leveling it and building, starting fresh?
My
or-
understanding, it's going to be leveled and there's going to be a whole new building.
Are you going to start fresh?
Right.
Thank you. Anyone, any comments, questions? Anyone in the audience have a comment or question on this item? If there's no one in Zoom, closes the part of the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Iglesias and Mr. Casanova. Second by Mr. Gamon. Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa? Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. D. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. Gamon?
Yes.
Item has been approved.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. if I missed it, did we ask for any comments from the electronic vote? We did.
Yes, there's
Okay.
nobody there. I checked with IT. The only one on the electronic audience is Deborah. I'm sure, listen, I see you smiling face. If you have a comment, by all means, chime in.
Mhm.
Give us a thumbs up. There you go.
LU2, small-scale map amendment from low-density residential to commercial. Property located at 374 West 34th Street, Hialeah zoned R1, one family district. Applicant Cesar Mestre Esquire.
Cesar Mestre Law Office is at 8105 Northwest 155th Street, Miami Lakes, Florida.
The property in this application is located on the south side of West 34th Street and is the second lot north of the southeastern intersection of Red Road and West 34th Street. The property has low-density residential land use classification and is currently vacant. The adjacent properties to the east and south also have low-density residential land use, and the adjacent property to the west currently has residential office land use and is in the process of requesting a land use change to commercial. The property across the street from the subject property is currently improved as a parking lot with P parking designation. The applicant is before the city requesting a land use change from low-density residential to commercial with the purpose of redeveloping the site as a parking lot to serve the adjacent property to the west, creating a buffer between the existing single-family home and a proposed two-story building that will face Red Road. Since the residential office land use and zoning classification proved to be outdated because they do not meet the current demands of professional offices, many offices within this classification remain the same as in the 70s and 80s. Since there is no incentive for renewal because of the limitation on the number of occupational licenses allowed. Having analyzed the issue and trying to accommodate to the current demands of professional use, staff believes that a land use change to commercial paired with a low-intensity commercial classification such as B1 would incentivize replacement of old professional offices, such as the subject property, as it is already occurring along the 49th Street corridor west of Red Road. Since the property is proposed to be developed as a parking lot, it could remain with its current low-density residential land use and be rezoned to P. However, since it will be jointly developed with the adjacent property to the west and will serve to satisfy required parking, a unity of title will be required. So it will be reasonable that both get the same land use and zoning classification. Jointly developed properties oftentimes get consolidated and assigned a single folio number. So when they have different land use and zoning designations, confusion arises over time. The city traffic concurrency system indicates that the traffic level of services will be met. The site is served by PS 04-059, that is in TM, temporary moratorium status, where allocation is not allowed. The station has to be reviewed to verify if additional lining is needed for final certification. The applicant shall contact the Public Works Department to agree on the next steps and submit a briefing with its rezoning application. Recommendation approval.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Again, this is the sister companion file to the other one. This is the lot next door. This is going to be the parking for the two-story medical
I want
building.
sorry to interrupt. I want to clarify for the record, to correct that the properties that had their land use change are east of Red Road, no west of Red Road. And also, Cesar, before you explain, remember the last sentence that says that before you come for the rezoning, you should meet with the Public Works Department to understand and to come into an agreement how you will work with this temporary moratorium.
Understood. I know that that's the case in a lot of the city. I've dealt with it already, so I will contact staff over there and see what we need to do and have that as part of our application. So this is
Okay.
the sister case. This is the parking lot. And again, this mirrors exactly what is across the street. There's a two-story medical building with the lot next door being the parking lot. That's exactly what we're proposing here. So we ask you for a recommendation of approval.
Thank you. There was a mention here about unity of title or,
Yeah, we will be creating a unity of title that'll be recorded and it'll go through your legal department, which will basically make the
Going
two
down.
lots one.
okay. They belong to the
You
same
can-
individual,
That's
right?
You can do that. You can do that, or you can consolidate the folio numbers into one.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
maybe that is easier because the billing department will require you to do that.
We're not going to get rid of the parking lot once we have.
No,
the
no,
building, so
no, it's
It makes sense to us.
Yeah.
That's fine.
good deal. Comments or questions from the board? No comments or questions from the board. Anyone in the audience have a comment or question on this item? Anyone in the electronic item? Really? Anyone in the electronic audience? None heard. Closes the part of the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve. Second that motion.
Motion, Mr. Casanova, second, Mr. Iglesias. Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. D. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa? Mr. Ramon?
Yes.
Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Item has been approved.
Thank you very much. Good
Thank
night.
you, Mr. Mister. A little bit of a tongue twister there.
Happens to the best of us.
Yep. Oh, yes. Okay, so that, with Mr. Mester's last words there, closes the land use part of the hearing. Meeting is closed, and it opens up the planning and zoning. Everyone has been sworn in, everyone has been identified, so it's a beautiful thing. We'll just move right along onto the planning and zoning.
Item number 1, approval of Planning and Zoning Board summary agenda of August 24th, 2022, as submitted. I need a
Second.
Second.
motion, Mr. Ulloa, second, Mrs. Enriquez. Mr. Ramon?
Yes.
Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa? Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. D. Perez?
Yes.
Item has been approved. A written decision and resolution will be prepared and presented for review to the City Council. The City Council is authorized to affirm with conditions, or override the decisions by resolution. After the resolution is adopted, contact a member of the City Clerk's office to obtain a copy of the final decision and resolution. Upon your receipt of the final decision and resolution, contact the building department to obtain your required building permit. Summary minutes or a copy of the audio file of the proceedings before the Planning and Zoning Board shall be prepared and submitted to the City Council before its hearing. The Planning and Zoning Board recommendations for the following public hearing requests will be heard by the City Council at a scheduled meeting of Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. Item number 2, rezoning property from RO Residential Office to RO Residential Office to incorporate a new site plan as required by Section 98-784 of the City of Hialeah Code of Ordinances. Property located at 260 Hialeah Drive, Hialeah zoned RO Residential Office. Applicant Nelson Sanchez.
Nelson Sanchez? Name and address, please.
60 Hialeah Drive, Hialeah, obviously, and to the 33010.
Name?
Nelson Sanchez.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we're just planning to,
Let-
actually,
Let Chris read it into the record first, and then we'll talk about it. Just a minute.
The property in this application is located on the south side of Hialeah Drive, east of Eucalyptus Drive. The property has residential office land use and residential office zoning classification However, it has been used as single-family home, and its use was never changed to office through a building permit. Section 98-784 of the City of Hialeah Code of Ordinances requires the zoning classification to be tied to a site plan, and Section 98-785 requires an improvement plan for which a building permit must be issued within 1 year of this rezoning ordinance. The subject property never submitted such site plan because the designation of the property as residential office predates the requirement, but because its use remained as a single-family house, its redevelopment as office requires the approval of a site plan. The subject application formally proffers such site plan and improvement plan, with the site plan signed and sealed by Mario Duani, dated April 7th, 2022, in accordance with residential office regulations. Accordingly, the property is hereby requested to be rezoned from RO to RO, or its existing RO zoning ratified, incorporating by reference the above mentioned plan. Recommendation approval.
Okay, so it's presently on RO,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
you're requesting to rezone from RO to RO. Okay? It's the same thing, only different.
Exactly.
Or ratify the existing zoning. So Deborah, would you like to, before we open the floor for the gentleman, would you like to enlighten me on this, please?
well, since the residential office zoning classification requires a site plan to be tied to the rezoning, this property was rezoned before this requirement, but it was never converted. Although in the map it shows as residential office, it was built as a house and remained as a house, was never redeveloped as an office, or the use changed. So now that they want to change the use, and the code has a requirement that the residential office needs to be tied to a site plan, they are submitting a site plan. So David, when he writes the ordinance, he will decide if he wants to rezone from RO to RO, or to ratify the existing zoning and incorporate the site plan prepared by Mario Duani, PE, dated April 7, 2022. It's a formality, but that's the way that we should do it.
That right there, see, that's the key word right there. It's a formality. It's kind of like housekeeping for the
Exactly.
for the layman, right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, you have the floor. Comments or questions?
Thank you. Yeah, well, and actually, as mentioned, this building has been using as a commercial office for quite a while ago. I've been using it for several business, attorney, also style salon, retail office, real estate office as well. It's the last time. So obviously, it's been built. It's already made it as an office, a commercial. The only main point of it is about the parking. So I've been using the front part of it. Representative of the city of Hialeah, they actually were to be occupied by us. We realized it was not really commercial at that point. Even was bought as a commercial. And then we also planning to make a parking in the backyard. We contacted also the fire department in the city as well. And this was a perfectly, worked through, because the distance in the backyard is 150. Even the fork truck they can go through, even the hose perfectly go all the way up. So we can actually make the park in the backyard. We presented as well the parking plan son as well to just be approved. That's the main point of it.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions from the board? I see that smile on your face like you're ready to, no? You good? Good. Okay. On this side? Anyone in the audience have a comment or question? Anyone in the electronic audience have a comment or question? Closes the part of the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve?
Second that motion?
Motion, Mr. Iglesias, second, Mr. Casanova. Mr. Ulloa?
Yes.
Mr. D. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Ramon?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Item has been approved.
Okay, so the next step will be, David, get with you or you wouldn't.
I'm just going to prepare the ordinance now for city council.
So, but he does need to come back
He
for,
needs to come back to city council on September 27th at 7 PM.
September 27th here. Yes. Okay?
For city council meeting.
But do they need to come and see staff or everything will be, okay. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Item number 3, rezoning property from C1 Restricted Retail Commercial District to C3 Extended Liberal Commercial District to allow the proposed expansion of the adjacent gas station and convenience store. Property located at 336 West 9th Street, Hialeah Zone C1 Restricted Retail Commercial District. Applicant 9th Street Crossing LLC.
Name and address, please.
Good afternoon, Osni Jean. 10755 Sand Hill Road, Dallas, Texas, 75238.
Thank you. Let city planner read it into the record and we'll talk about it.
The property in this application is located on the south side of West 9th Street, in the middle of the block between West Okeechobee Road and West 3rd Avenue. It has frontage of West 9th Street and West Okeechobee Road. On its east side, it is adjacent to a strip mall on the northern portion and to a Miami-Dade County water and sewer facility on its southern portion. On its west side, it is adjacent to a gas station. The northern portion of the parcel is landscaped, and the southern portion is improved with a parking lot that serves the adjacent gas station. The property has C1 zoning and commercial land use. The adjacent property to the west, the gas station, has C3 zoning, and the adjacent properties to the east have C2 zoning. The adjacent property's C3 zoning designation is consistent with its current use as a gas station. The applicant is before the city with a request to rezone the property from C1 to C3 in relation to a redevelopment proposal to consolidate this parcel with the one adjacent to the west and redevelop the gas station with a different configuration and a new convenience store building. Since the proposed rezoning is consistent with the area and with the proposed use, the request shall be approved. Recommendation approval.
Thank you, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you, staff, for the presentation. We don't have a presentation or anything else to add. We're available if you have any questions or consultants are here. It's pretty straightforward. We just want to consolidate the property and to rebuild the existing gas station to a new one. And that's all we're available for your questions.
Okay. Comments or questions?
Yes. Yes, completely.
And then you're gonna use the lot behind it.
Yes,
You're gonna be using the lot behind the marathon also?
correct.
Okay. You don't mind me asking, what kind of gas station is it?
Murphy.
Murphy?
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone in the audience have a comment or question? Anyone in the electronic audience? No comments heard. Close to the part of the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Casanova and Mr. Iglesias, second by Mr. Gamon. Mr. D. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. Gamon? Mr.
Yes.
Iglesias?
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa?
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Item has been approved.
Thank you.
Item number 4, variance permit to allow the expansion of a legal non-conforming use for the redevelopment of an existing senior living facility currently having 100 assisted living facility beds and 276 skilled nursing beds, and conditional use permit to allow a 276-bed skilled nursing facility with a distance separation of less than 500 feet from single-family homes and less than 1,200 feet from another existing similar facility. Properties located at 195 West 26th Street, 141 West 27th Street, 130, 140, 150, and 160 West 28th Street, Hialeah Zones R3, Multiple Family District. Applicant Javier L. Vasquez, Esquire.
Thank you. Javi, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. Javi Vasquez, office at 1450 Brickell Avenue on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, sir.
The properties in this application are located on the west end of the block surrounded by West 28th Street on the north, West 27th Street on the south, West 2nd Avenue on the west, West 1st Avenue on the east, and includes 16 lots encompassing 2.4 acres. 11 of those 16 lots are developed with an assisted living facility and nursing facility operating on the site as Hialeah Convalescent Home since the mid-1960s. The use of the property is considered legal non-conforming since such use currently requires the approval of a conditional use permit. Those 11 lots have major institutions land use. The intense use of the property and scarce parking availability has been an issue for a long time. Acknowledging the problem, 5 adjacent lots have been acquired with the intention of consolidating the 16 lots and redeveloping the site with a state-of-the-art skilled nursing facility with 276 beds. The 5 lots that were recently acquired are through a land use amendment process to get its land use changed from medium density residential to major institutions. At this time, the applicant is before the city requesting a variance permit to allow the expansion of the legal non-conforming use for the redevelopment of the existing facility that includes 100 assisted living facility beds and 276 skilled nursing beds, and requesting a conditional use permit to allow a 276-bed skilled nursing facility with a distance separation of less than 500 feet from single-family homes and less than 1,200 feet from another existing similar facility as required by Code Section 98-1988. The proposed development includes the partial demolition of a large part of the existing complex and the incorporation of a new perimeter building facing West 2nd Avenue and 27th Street, including a new garage on the first floor and a 3-story skilled nursing facility above, including 180 beds. Both buildings will be connected on the ground floor and on the second floor. The newly acquired parcels will be developed with surface parking complemented with lush landscaping. The proposed building facade have a contemporary design and the first floor garage openings will be covered with a modern screening system. The proposed redevelopment will improve the current conditions by providing adequate parking, alleviating the current shortage, and eliminating all parking backing out into the streets. The proposed redevelopment is consistent and compatible with the area, and its contemporary architectural language will bring renewal to an old area of the city, hopefully inspiring others to follow the same path. Since the new building occupies the footprint of the buildings to be demolished and the incorporated new parcels will be improved with parking, the reduced distance separation will have no impact on the neighborhood and will not create an overconcentration because the use is already existing. In light of the above considerations, the variance and conditional use permit shall be approved. Recommendation approved.
Thank you, sir. Abby?
Thank you,
Have the
Mr.
floor.
Chairman and board members. Once again, Javi Vasquez. This application, this property has 2 parts as far as the entitlements go. The first part is a land use amendment. As you read or heard in the analysis, it's 16 parcels. It's an assembly of 16 parcels, of which 11 are the current existing ALF that's been there since the 60s. The owner has bought an additional 5 units, and those 5 units are the subject of a land use amendment that came before this board a couple of weeks ago. I know a couple of you were not able to be here that night. And now what comes before you tonight is the second part of the entitlements, which is the conditional use and the expansion of the legal nonconformity, which is what you have when you have an existing ALF on 11 lots that's going to end up on 16 lots. There's no need to be redundant to what's been read into the record as far as the analysis goes. This is a much needed overhaul, right, Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Of a property that's been there since the 60s. It's going to be a state-of-the-art facility, and these 2 sets of entitlements are what we need to make all of this happen. From here, we go to the city council. We already have this board's recommendation of approval on the land use component, and we request your approval of the same of the conditional use before you.
Thank you, sir. I can tell you from personal experience that there are 2 board members here that have firsthand experience with that particular property, and we both agree that it is a much-needed improvement for there. I do have one question, though, just because you know me, I like to stir the pot a little bit. Given the fact that you're going to do improvements and all kinds of good stuff, just out of curiosity, is the facility equipped with an emergency standby generator to facilitate? You see, I touched the sore subject there. No,
We got to give them a reason to be here tonight, right?
there you go. Please state your name and address.
Alex Menendez, 10520 Northeast 6th Avenue, Miami Shores. The facility has a 350 kilowatt. Facility runs on itself for 72 hours by ACA standards right now. The
Okay.
new one is going to be the same. It has to by standards.
See, you just said it has to. And that's because I know that in the past, there have been a lot of talk and a lot of eyebrow raising about facilities such as this one not being compliant with backup generation when the power goes out. And we all know what happened a few years ago
That became
in Broward.
After that became a requirement for all
Exactly.
ALS.
Exactly. So that was my question to you also. I just wanted to get it on the record. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Anyone in the audience have a comment or question on this item? Anyone in the electronic audience have a comment or question? Closes the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second the motion.
Okay. Motion, Mr. Gamon,
Yes.
second by Mr. Iglesias and Mr. Jimenez. Mr. D. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Gamon,
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez,
Yes.
Mr. Iglesias,
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez,
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa, Mr. Casanova.
Yes.
Item has been approved.
You have the power.
The land use component goes to the council next Tuesday, correct?
The
And then this
13th,
goes to the council on
the
the 27th.
27th.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Item number 5, conditional use permit to allow a K through 6th grade elementary school with a maximum capacity of 47 students in conjunction with 36 children daycare. Property located at 380 West 21st Street, Hialeah zoned M1 Industrial District. Applicant, AJM Hialeah Holdings LLC.
AJM. Could you please
Yes.
identify yourself?
Good evening, Alicia Paez, 3697 Northwest 102nd Street, Miami, Florida, 33147.
Thank you. Let the planner read it into the record and we'll talk about it.
The property in this application is located at the southeast intersection of Red Road and West 21st Street and is zoned M1. The building interior was remodeled as a daycare in 2001 with the understanding that a building permit for the parking lot would follow. The plans for the parking lot were submitted in 2002 and later abandoned. At this time, the property is improved with a 4,569 square foot building, 14 parking spaces, and a 6,000 square foot playground located on the west side of the building. Over the years, school grades were added to the original daycare with no update on the business tax receipt or compliance with zoning requirements such as parking increase and a conditional use permit approval. The existing parking lot encroaches into an existing open alley, city right-of-way, at the rear of the property. The applicant is before the city requesting a conditional use permit to allow a K through 6th grade elementary school with a maximum capacity of 47 students in conjunction with a 36 children daycare. Since this property has a 7,709 square foot lot and its south side is adjacent to an open alley, the applicant was advised by the zoning department to adapt the site for the use intensification and to remedy the existing violations. The submitted floor plan includes 2 classrooms for the daycare with a maximum capacity of 36 children and 6 classrooms for the school with a maximum capacity of 47 students in kindergarten through 6th grade. 9 teachers, a principal, and 3 additional staff members will be employed by the school. The site plan submitted with the application includes the existing playground area reduction, the creation of an additional parking lot on the west side of the lot to comply with parking requirements, and the proposal to use the alley for traffic circulation, creating an internal car queue with a capacity of 8 cars. 17 parking spaces are proposed to be provided in an enlarged parking lot where 13 will be occupied by staff. 1 will remain open as an accessible parking space, and the remaining 3 will be used for kindergarten drop-off. Since a 47-student school would generate a car queue of 7 cars, a traffic circulation plan, including an entrance for pickup and drop-off from the alley adjacent to the south side of the property that runs from West 3rd Avenue westward and a proposed exit on the easternmost driveway on West 21st Street is being proposed. This proposed site layout with parents accessing the site from the alley is crucial for an acceptable traffic circulation. As such, to be effective, it has to be enforced by the school by informing and educating the parents about the traffic circulation pattern in place, placing cones at the westernmost driveway on West 21st Street, and having personnel available to assist in the pickup drop-off process. Otherwise, cars would negatively impact the West 21st Street Red Road busy intersection, as oftentimes happens now. The requested conditional permit could be approved for the requested number of students with the condition that a site improvement details in the plan prepared by Octavio Santurio, architect, be permitted and the work finalized before August 2023, prior to the start of the school year. If this condition is not met, the BTR for the school should not be renewed in 2023. Recommendation approved with conditions.
Thank you. Comments or questions?
The name is Octavio Santurio. Office is at 6262 Southwest 40th Street. I just want to bring out to the light that we agree with all the requirements, all things that we need to do. And this is actually a reorganization of an existing daycare with 83 children. It's just that 47 will be attending the elementary portion of it, and the remaining 36 will still be in the daycare. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Comments or questions? No one on the board? Anyone in the audience have a comment or question in this item?
Well, I want to say thank you to the applicant and to Mr. Santurio, because they really worked together with me. And I know it was a big sacrifice to reduce that gigantic playground, but I think it was worth it, and everything will work very well now.
Thank you.
And I hope that you pull the permit quickly and you don't find yourself in a rush next year when you have to renew your BTR. So tomorrow you can be submitting the plans for site plan review, so you get the permit soon.
Oh, boy, encouraging. I mean, you don't get that too often. Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else in Zoom would like to chime in? No? Okay, closest to part of the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Motion, Mr. Iglesias,
With
second, Mr.
conditions.
Ua.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramon?
Yes.
Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Mrs. Enrique?
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa? Mr. D. Perez?
Yes,
Item has been approved with conditions.
thank you.
Good evening.
Night. Item number 6, special use permit to allow the expansion of the neighborhood business district overlay for the development of a 58-unit multifamily mixed-use development. Variance permit to allow all residential units with areas ranging from 523 square feet to 728 square feet, where 850 square feet is the minimum required, and only 10% of the units may have an area of 600 square feet. Allow 5.5 feet front setback for staircase where 10 feet built to line are required. Allow 18% pervious area where 30% is the minimum required, and parking variance to allow 160 parking spaces where 266 are required. Property located at 8155 West 12th Avenue, Hialeah Zone C1, Restricted Retail Commercial District. Applicant Alejandro J. Arias, Esquire, on behalf of Daniel Camano. Well, it's going to be Hugo Arza.
Yeah, it looks like Alex got,
Paid Alex get dressed up, but then I took the hearing back.
ain't that something?
Hugo Arza, 701 Brickell Avenue. I am joined by Alejandro Arias in the suit in the back. Gentleman, do his job.
The property in this application is located on the east side of West 12th Avenue, south of the Granny Expressway, and adjacent on its south side to the Hialeah Miami Lakes High School. The property includes 2.61 acres, has major institutions land use and is developed with a 4,051 square foot building used as a daycare as approved by a special use permit in 1961. The property is zoned C1. The adjacent land uses are major institutions and commercial to the north, major institutions to the east, and low-density residential to the west, across West 12th Avenue. The application is undergoing a land use amendment process to have its land use changed to commercial. At this time, the applicant is before the city requesting a special use permit to expand the regulations of the NBD overlay to the node area and associated variances related to a redevelopment proposal. The proposed redevelopment consists of a 3-story mixed-use building with retail on the first floor and 2 floors of residential units above. The site layout includes 2 buildings set up in an L shape with a surface parking lot at the front and a row of parking at the rear of the largest building. The residential units will include 7 2-bedroom units and 22 1-bedroom units on each floor for a total of 58 units. The retail component on the first floor includes 27,122 square feet. The proposed development program requires 266 parking spaces, and the applicant is proposing a total of 160 parking spaces and requested a variance to allow the proposed 40% parking reduction. If the 2-bedroom units get 2 parking spaces assigned and the 1-bedroom units get 1 parking space assigned, 72 parking spaces will be occupied by the residential units. 82 parking spaces will be available for the 27,122 square foot retail, and 6 accessible parking spaces will remain open to be used as needed. West 12th Avenue at this location has 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, flanked by a narrow sidewalk on each side, so on-street parking is not possible on West 12th Avenue. The block where the property is located includes a high school with a student population of 1,300 students. On-street parking is available on West 79th Street and West 10th Avenue at the school perimeter at a walking distance from the site ranging from 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the availability. Most likely, parking would not be available during school hours, but might be available at night and on weekends. However, given the dense residential area east and south of the block, it will probably be challenging to find empty parking spots. Consequently, on-street parking demand might overflow to the low-density residential area on the west side of the property across West 12th Avenue, which is closer to the site, negatively impacting the area where parked cars will erode the swale area. At the same time, this could create a dangerous situation where people parking west of West 12th Avenue would cross the street at a location where no lights or safe crossing exists. The proposed 40% parking reduction could only be absorbed by the site if the commercial use gets limited, eliminating high parking demand uses such as schools, medical offices, and restaurants. And the proposed uses are set to satisfy daily needs of the surrounding population, which is dense enough to bring sufficient business. Staff believes that this situation requires an analysis by a traffic engineer to report which are the uses with less parking demand and recommend improvements to West 12th Avenue to improve safety. Once this report is received, the recommendation should be made part of the conditions set for the approval of the special use permit. As for the variances requested for the unit size, reduced setback for staircase fronting West 12th Avenue and previous area reduction are all approvable. However, the need for the above-mentioned report and the fact that the pump station that serves the site is in temporary moratorium status as stated in the land use amendments planner report that is in process. Staff believes that the application cannot be recommended for approval until additional information is provided, and the application should be tabled. Since the land use amendment in process will not be effective after 30 days of approval of the ordinance, October 28, 2022, tabling this item until September 21st, Planning and Zoning Board meeting will still give the applicant the possibility of finalizing both processes concurrently. Recommendation, table the item.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Again, Hugo Arza, 701 Brickell Avenue. Giselis is going to put up a presentation. We're going to hit on some highlights, and we are obviously going to take some special attention to address some of the parking questions that Deborah and staff have. Terrific. So this is a broader aerial of the site. I'm no doubt familiar to most of you. Let's go to the next slide. It's just a little bit closer in. There we go. Property location, just on the east side of West 12th Avenue and just north of the high school. I was surprised. Does the high school really only have 1,300 students? I mean, I believe Deborah's report, but seems like a pretty low number. I mean, my graduating class was about 1,100 students, and there were 4 classes, so 1,300 students. I thought there were more students there, but nevertheless, HML is there and close proximity to our site. Let's go to the next slide. Current use of the property is a closed down school that had been previously approved. It's got to be the most underutilized property in all of Hialeah. I mean, this is like a 2.5 acre property with a 4,000 square foot building. I mean, you'd think you were building a house out in the Redlands. I mean, it's very curious how after 50 years of growth in Hialeah, this parcel has remained with just this tiny little building and all of this in the middle of what otherwise obviously has been substantially developed. But that's what's there today. The owners have owned it for a long, long time and now want to sell. And obviously being on West 12th Avenue and being on a major corridor, what is certainly the highest and best use is something more akin to what we're proposing. Next slide. So the current land use, it's institutions still, the school, but as Deborah in the report stated and Chris stated, it is moving through this board recommended unanimously to change the land use. And so that process is a step or a meeting ahead or a hearing ahead of this one, as is often the case. You've heard a couple of times. A couple of my colleagues, zoning lawyers today have been mentioning, that these projects come to you guys sort of in staggered phases. So you've seen this property already, but you're getting to see the project now. But the land use will soon be changed. The zoning to restricted retail commercial, which allows for our next slide, which is the application request to expand the neighborhood business district overlay, which is really what gives us the ability to create a mixed-use project. And so this is a request that you've probably heard either me or Alex request on behalf of this applicant in particular, Prestige, probably 10 times, 12 times, 14 times over the last 5 years. On major corridors, the city has tried to, again, take advantage of the fact we've got major roads to bring in mixed-use development. So that's what we're asking for here. And then the non-use variances, putting aside parking for a second, which we'll delve into more. The rest are fairly minor, setback of 5 feet, some things that are not, we're blessed with this property because we're not adjacent to any single family homes. I mean, there are single family homes across on West 12th, across, I guess it would be 5 lanes, because I think it's 2 in each direction and a turn lane. So across 5 lanes on the other side, there are single family homes. But what's adjacent to our property is the school and a church to the north. So we're not providing for a big intensification to the uses that are already around us. I mean, the school's a fairly intense use. Churches are not. On Sundays, perhaps they're a little bit more intense, but by the same token, then they're not as impacted. Certainly when you ask for a setback next to a single family home, a resident feels it. We don't have that dynamic here. And I think Deborah's report, and I thank her for that, states that the variances can be approved. They're certainly reasonable in nature. And there's the, again, we're changing the land use from major institutions to commercial, and that should be completed in the next couple of weeks. Next slide. So the conceptual site plan for the mixed-use project is got an L shape. So 12th Avenue is on the top here. So to the right is north. So to the left is the school. So just think of 12th Avenue on the front. When we turn these things around to orient them north-south, they get really, really tiny. So we keep them east-west like this, but just kind of, bear with me. But so that's how we do it with an L. What the L allows us to do, and the property is deep enough, is that we've got parking in the front, but we also have some parking in the back. Typically for retail, you would never recommend that, but because we've got a mixed-use project with 58 residential units and retail, 22,000, I think, I'm going from memory on the slide there, but I can't see that far. That rear parking plays well with the fact that residents, it's not as important, right? I mean, storefronts and people coming in need to see the store, be able to see the store from the street, park. I mean, if you live there, you know where you live. And if you're assigned a parking space in the back, we'll have entrances and you'll go into your building. It's not, you wouldn't typically see a traditional retail facility with parking in the back, but certainly here it makes sense. I'm going to get into, we talk a little bit about the square footages of restaurants and the like. We have been approached by a daycare, but not a school. And so let's go to the next slide because I think we get into this is the corridor, and I've been referencing this. I mean, obviously the road and the underutilization of this parcel, but also just the fact that this is a major thoroughfare almost at the edge of the city, getting to Miami Lakes. Next slide. So yeah, so here are some of the concerns. And look, Deborah brings up some good concerns anytime you're bringing together a mix of uses and asking for a parking variance. You need to work hard to justify it. We have reached out. You know, we talked to staff last week. We couldn't get a parking study report done in time for tonight. I opted to give it the old college try because we have already started to take some proactive steps to address. We've taken out certain intense uses like schools. We realize that those uses bring in traffic at 2 points of the day that create chaos. I've got 3 kids. I know what happens. A shopping center like this with mixed use on top would not be a good place. Daycare is a little different because daycare, everybody doesn't show up at the same time. People can come in and out. It's also going to be limited in size. This is not going to be a 200, child daycare. It would be a smaller daycare. We've limited it to 6,000 square feet of restaurant. It's about a quarter of the retail. Restaurants have a lot of turnover, need a lot of parking spaces, but it's, the 6,000 aren't going to necessarily be one big restaurant with a ton of use. It could be 2,000 square feet of bakery and 2,000 square feet of a coffee shop and a 2,000 square foot restaurant, or a sandwich shop and a restaurant and a bakery. I mean, the point is we're not talking, a 6,000 square foot restaurant could be a Chili's, could be as the size of 6,000 feet. And obviously you would think, well, that's going to have, 50, 100 cars at all times. We're not talking about one restaurant here. We are committed to bringing in some smaller type uses, again, serving the 58 units and residents that are here and the neighborhood. So again, we think by sort of providing that mix, reducing the amount of restaurant, the commercial retail then, remains then at a lower amount for, let's call it traditional retail, which then tends to operate daytime hours, perhaps on Saturday. Most standard retail isn't going to be open on Sunday, not going to be open in the evenings, and that leads us into something that Prestige has experienced, which is the shared parking concept. And so there are times of the day in which there will be more parking available during the day because folks are out and about and working. Weekends, folks are home, but the restaurant, the businesses, some of the businesses, the restaurants will be open, but some of the businesses, are possibly not going to be open. Certainly in the evenings, the businesses aren't going to be open. Maybe just the restaurant and the coffee shop are open, but nothing else is. And so you're able to manage a lot more. The mix of units, it's about 2/3, 1/3, 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom. So a majority of 1 bedroom units that would be assigned 1 parking space. So the 2 bedroom units would be assigned 2. The 1 bedroom units would be assigned 1. We can all sort of agree that a 2 bedroom unit's definitely going to have 2 people. A 1 bedroom unit might. Certainly couples are going to live in it. And we understand that dynamic. But you're also going to get some solo renters, right? I mean, the price point, Prestige is not, renting out $3,000 luxury apartments. They're serving the workforce. And so you're going to have folks where it's 1 person. And so again, that'll address some of the parking concerns. I think Deborah, did the math for us. And I think if you add up the 2 parking spaces for 2 bedrooms and a 1 for the 1 bedrooms, it was 70 something, leaving, even if all of those folks are parked there, 80 some odd parking spaces for the retail that we have. Again, which is not going to be intended to bring high volume car use because the smaller strip neighborhood center may have a dry cleaner, people come in and out, going to have a coffee shop, it may have a barber shop, it may have, uses, but you're not going to have the types of uses that you see great intensity of parking for, like you would at, I don't know, like a big grocery store or, certainly like a Best Buy or places that are really like, you really get hundreds of cars all the time. So the point is, we're going to carefully work on, as we have already by limiting the square footages, the types of users we have so that the parking that's here works for what we are proposing. Like I said, we have asked the traffic consultant to perform less of a traffic concern, although I do want to touch on one point Deborah mentioned, and more of the parking. And we hope to provide that. We can continue moving forward. We're going to provide that report. We can move forward and have that. And Deborah would still have, approximately a month before we get to second reading, 2 weeks before first reading. We're trying to get something in our hands by the end of this week or beginning of next week. So she would have ample time to see more of the details of the mix and maybe get more comfortable. You know, I appreciate that without that information, her recommendation is to table. And certainly if that's the wish this evening, you know, we would, as we always do, consider that and understand that there is another process going through that needs to finish anyway. Maybe we have that time, but we were ready to go tonight. And so we figured we'd give it the shot. In terms of any improvements on West 12th Avenue, this property has to be platted. So when we get to the county, we'll have to give them a traffic study based on the uses we're proposing. And if there's a need for, let's say, a turn lane into our site, like a northbound turn lane or any improvement on West 12th Avenue, you know, Mama County, who is the traffic overseer, they have traffic jurisdiction in incorporated and unincorporated Miami-Dade County, will certainly not be shy to ask for any of those improvements. We will have to plat. We will not be able to avoid any possible future West 12th Avenue improvements that the county requests for. So in terms of concerns about that, if merited and warranted, this applicant will have to do it. Let's say that's similar to finding out that there's a temporary moratorium on water and sewer or any of the other types of development issues that pop up. There are things that, you know, I like to remind folks, this is the first step we're taking, literally, planning and zoning, a couple more. Then we go through a site plan and concurrency review in the city, and that takes several months, and that's when the departments really dig into it. The county gets its teeth in it. I mean, you won't see a shovel in the ground for a year. So there's a lot of time. And so you may say, well, so what's the big deal about losing time? Well, time is still money. And so the quicker we can get started, the quicker that shovel gets into the ground. And so we think we've tried to highlight and address some of those parking concerns. We'll try and answer any questions that you may have, but we will be providing that study. And we think with this and the study that we'll provide, we could move forward this evening and obviously just supplement the record as we move forward. I think that's the last meaningful slide. I think the last one is, I think the last one is just generally the project highlights, which I won't bore you guys with. I drove from Prestige's restaurant, La Romanita, which if any of you haven't been to, shameless plug, it's terrific. I met the Prestige guys there and drove from there now to this meeting. And I think I passed 4 Prestige projects under construction between Amelia, Palm, all along Palm. They're active, very active, sons of Hialeah born and raised developers. And so they, are continuing to invest, millions and millions and millions of dollars, which is what a project like this will cost in their home city. They've had many opportunities and they'll dabble once in a blue moon in some other city and they just keep coming back because they love their home city. And so they know their market. I think that's what's important about that. There's a lot of good folks that want to invest in the city. And I'm sure the city will take investments from all corners, as they should. But the folks that are from here, grew up here, understand that market and that dynamic, are in that unique position. And so this board and the council have always been very supportive of their projects. But we understand there are always questions and we're happy to answer those. So I think that's it. I don't know if there's anything else Deborah wants to add before you guys get your questions, but hopefully, we would ask you to go ahead and move this forward favorably, allow us to continue to work with staff at this point. And if you have questions or a request, we'll certainly consider it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Always good to see you.
Deborah, would you like to come in and make a comment on this or?
Well, Chris read my report. I think my belief is that we shouldn't rush this. We can very well wait 2 weeks and in these 2 weeks, receive the information that we need. We need you to have a meeting with water and sewers to see some kind of preliminary agreement or something. Because when you go to a city council, we need to have the conditional use permit. We need to have the DOR. And at this time, we don't have any conditions to impose. So I think we should give the planning and zoning board the benefit to know what is going to happen, if some improvements are going to happen on West 12th Avenue, and what will happen with the temporary moratorium that we already mentioned at the land use. So I think that we can use these 2 weeks to get those things set up and know more about this, and then continue. It's not bad because you're still going through the land use amendment, so we all have more time. I think it's more convenient. I don't know what David thinks, but I'm sure that David is with me because he's the one rushing everyone at the end, because the DOR is not ready. So I think it's prudent to wait 2 weeks and to table the item now.
It may be prudent to wait 2 weeks. for the parking considerations, I mean, I will say, Deborah knows I love her. We're not going to have an answer in 2 weeks on the temporary moratorium for the water and sewer plant. And we're not going to know what improvements to West 12th Avenue, because we're not going to plat this property until we're approved and we go to Miami-Dade County, and it'll be months from now. So, I mean,
No, but two things. You were having,
the other two issues, 2 weeks, 2 months wouldn't make a difference. And I know we're not going to defer for 2 months. So I respect on the parking issue, if this board feels that having more concrete data to make a decision to fine tune the uses and the parking, absolutely agree. But I just want to be blunt. When I come here in 2 weeks and I provide that data, I'm highly unlikely to be able to tell you anything about an improvement on West 12th Avenue, because the county is not going to review this until much more down the road.
no, not the county, but you can have a consultant do like a preliminary review and say, well, do you need to have a safe crossing here? You might need a stop sign, certain improvements that might be required. Unless you want to talk with David, some kind of language that you include that is assumed that prior to development, you will have all these improvements that no one knows which improvements will be. So I think it will be good also for you to know which are the improvements that might be required there. If not, you're going to sign something about something that you really don't know what will be.
Again, respectfully disagree, only because crosswalks, stop sign, all of those are county functions that we won't know for much longer. I can have my traffic engineer tell me if he thinks a crosswalk somewhere may be beneficial or worthwhile, but ultimately, even if the city wanted it, it's the county's jurisdiction whether to allow us to put it there or not. So again, on the parking, there's no doubt that we can fine tune uses and work on the mix and address concerns, let's call them inside the property. And we can do that to the satisfaction of the city as we go through this process. But again, the off-street or off-site improvements on West 12th, crosswalks, in case someone, I guess, wants to cross to our center. I mean, there is a crosswalk for HML a little further south because there's a school. So it makes sense that there would be one. Again, we are not going to know any of that in 2 weeks. I can bring you a consultant that says, well, there might be the potential for one here, but the most that the city could ever do in that, any city could ever do, is to say, okay, you'll pursue this with the county, but ultimately it's the county's decision. Again, I understand. I can read the room. Deborah's always been very helpful to work with us. I just want to be very clear, especially Mr. Chairman, you'll always remember what it is that I promised to do when I come back. I can't promise you that we can likely commit to West 12th Avenue crosswalks improvements of any type, because those are county functions. And I'm fairly confident we will not have any kind of real great moment of euphoria when it comes to the temporary moratorium on water and sewer, because we all know that that's taking much longer than 2 weeks or 4 weeks these days. And so if for other reasons we wish to defer, this body wishes to ask us to defer, we would certainly consider that. On the parking, we can come back with a lot of hard data and really fine tune that and give you more comfort. But I know you, Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to come back and be like, well, so what's the answer to the water moratorium issue, or where are the crosswalks going to be? And for me to not have said tonight, well, I don't think I'm going to have an answer in 2 weeks, but frankly, I don't think I'm going to have an answer for 2 months or 6 months.
So I asked that question last time.
I know.
Okay. And I still don't see the porta potties anywhere.
Right. Look, it's a risk. It's a development risk. Every property, many properties in Dade County have, temporary moratoriums because of pump station infrastructure that isn't up to date. And those things tend to get worked out. And the point is, you don't you don't have to connect until you build, right? And so we're talking, if there's no shovel in the ground for a year, we're talking about connecting 2 years from now. So there will be an opportunity to have discussions with both water and sewer in the city and then in the county, if necessary, about what kinds of things may be in place to help that temporary moratorium. But again, I mean, in 2 weeks, I'm not going to be able to tell you, yes, pump station such and such is going to be fixed by this date, and this is what's going to happen. That's not how it works. I just want to be very clear so that no one asks me that question in 2 weeks, and I'm sitting here saying, well, I don't know.
Deborah, do we have any idea what's happening with the pump station? Nothing at all?
No.
They haven't.
No.
And listen, just for the record, okay? Because I know that there's people out there that are,
Listening?
Yeah. The porta potty was just a joke.
Oh, no.
I mean,
of course.
I don't expect you to have a whole row of porta potties there. You know that I'm
Of
just,
course, of course.
but it is a concern with the
Absolutely.
moratorium on the pump
I mean, I
station.
think, if I'm not mistaken, Prestige was just able to, I'll give you one example, and then I'll let it go. I don't like to, I'm dogged till the end. This board and the city council approved 312, I think it was, units at Hialeah Park at the racetrack. And I think we did that approval about a year ago, Alex. Roughly speaking, it came to you guys about a year ago. I think it was a week ago that the final sort of what's going to happen and how are they going to solve the moratorium issue in that area. Different pump station, because the pump station next to the Hialeah racetrack is not the one next to 8155. But there are multiple pump stations with problems in the city. It's been a year, give or take. Maybe it's 10 months, maybe it's 13, but it's been a while since you all saw that project. Remember the beautiful one that had the charter school up on the top, and that whole project, and this board recommended approval, and then we got it approved at the city council. And it was just a week or two ago that I was informed by my client that the engineers had finally sort of figured out with the city and the county what needed to be done to let that continue moving forward. My point in saying that is that, again, in 2 weeks, I'm not going to have an answer. It could take months, but development takes some time. While we're platting, we'll continue to deal with those issues. Parking, we certainly can provide some more data, and if the board wanted to see that, we would, like I said, be very respectful to a recommendation for deferral. Since that one we can control, which uses and what are we going to do? That's in our control. Some of the other stuff is not.
All right, with that in mind, Deborah, you still stand by tabling, or can we put like a restricted covenant in there or condition, or so that he can keep the ball rolling?
What I do is I recommend, then you discuss and you decide, but it's my obligation to be prudent.
We understand.
I don't want to be pointed out and saying, you allow this and look at the problems that you don't have. You don't have a pump station. You don't know which are the improvements needed on West 12. You don't know what is the limitation on the usage. So it is my duty to say I prefer to be prudent and to table it, but you can have a different opinion.
Don't worry, we're not going to blame you for the porta potty. Okay, any comments or questions from the board? Anyone in the audience? Crickets. Anyone in the electronic audience other than Deborah? Okay, closest the part of the public hearing. Okay, folks, you heard Deborah. You
Motion
heard
to
the
table.
applicant. So
Motion to table.
Second.
we have a motion to table in a second.
Motion, Mr. Ulloa, second, Mrs. Enriquez. Mr. Iglesias?
Yes.
Mrs. Enriquez?
Yes.
Mr. Jimenez?
Yes.
Mr. Casanova?
Yes.
Mr. Ulloa?
Yes.
Mr. D. Perez?
I'll go with the majority. It's,
I don't, are we done? Sorry, is the roll call done?
yeah.
Sorry.
I need, Mr. Gamon?
Yes.
Item has been tabled.
Yeah. Again, I wish we had had a little more time to provide some of the parking data. We'll come back with that in 2 weeks. I'm not going to have water and sewer answers, and I'm not going to have West 12th Avenue answers. And so I hope the board will remember that, take into account the parking data, and then, of course, make its decision at that point. And I think we can move forward, but we look forward to seeing you. It means I get to see you all in 2 weeks. So.
Can you pass this item
Thank you
forward?
all. We're good,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. Anything else?
Pass this item forward so we can keep it.
Nine. Miscellaneous items not requiring advertising. Item number 7, old business. Okay, no old business. Item number 8, new business.
Yeah, can we have access to the thermostat here because it's.
It is toasty.
I second that one.
Jeez. That's one thing, last meeting was hot too. This meeting is even hotter.
John, it's only gonna get worse. Remember, they want us to drive electric cars,
There you go.
and now they're limiting when you can charge the electric cars. And now yes,
In California,
California, and they're taking over your smart thermostats remotely. They're racing. Well, new business, I'd like to welcome our new member here. Deborah, are you going to still be with us? Or, I mean, obviously you're going to be with us, but.
Of
it's
course. Now
gonna-
I am in a planning conference in Orlando, the one that you went with me last year in Miami. This year is in Orlando. So thank you, Chris. You did it very well. Better
You did.
accent than mine. So it was very good. Yes.
was-
And next time I will be with you. Yes.
That was a part, my comment on the new business was to, acknowledge this young man here that did a fabulous job. I mean, we broke him in pretty good. And I have one task for you, Deborah, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Say hello to Mickey
What?
for me.
What? Mickey. Okay.
Say hello to
okay.
Mickey. You're not like, if you don't go to Disney, I mean.
No,
come on.
I'm not going. Coming back on, I don't know if Thursday night or Friday, but I'm not going to Disney.
Hey, listen,
Next time.
next time you go say hello to Mickey Mouse. All right. Any other comments? Any questions? Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Bye.